Hello and welcome to my Ottoman Empire Let's Play. They just got a new rework, and as you can see, the focus tree is looking very, very different, and it looks like there is really two major decisions that you make throughout the focus tree. The first one is, do you want to more annex land, or do you want to make it more of a decentralizing, making puppets, which will make it easier to control the land, but the land that you have isn't quite as good. So you won't have, because you can get here where you can get like expanded recruitable population and available building spots. And then also over here, I guess you could call these two separate ones. The first one is you can do deterrence, and you basically just give up and you just try to avoid having people hate you. Or you can go abolish full neutrality and you can side with either the Austrians or you can side with what I think is basically siding with Germany. We'll see which way we go. And even though we have all those choices, right now we only have one we can actually do, I think. Yeah, sorry, we can expand the education ministry. Fighting an uphill battle ever since the revolution in 1908, the topic of education is of the utmost importance to the OHF. Significant steps have been made in regard, especially on the matter of co-education, but decentralization of the Ottoman education remains a thorn in our side. With upcoming co-education and unification decree, this will be annihilated in one fell swoop. I don't know what it means when it says there will be severe consequences. Maybe it'll make it where it changes our potential political path, but I'm not for sure. I'm not for sure. So we're not going to do it on purpose to make that fail. Now, some civs. Probably want to build up here just in case. There should still be a war with the Cairo Pact. So build up there where stuff is safe. 3 research slots, which is with the very basic stuff. We have planes and reserves that we'll worry about later. No divisions and basic training. Let's see. We got show you my divided up army real quick. We got some infantry over here. They're different templates though. We have our... I thought I had all my cavalry over there. Okay, how do I want to do this? Let's do it like that. And artillery specialist. Here, we'll just go with infantry leader. We have all of our cavalry over here under a cavalry expert. There it is. Cavalry expert as well as cavalry leader. And we have our mountaineers over here in their own separate thing. But everyone right now, probably when we press play, you'll see a lot of people are very undersupplied. See, we have 0 war support and bad supplies. Port equipment being built, which is fun. I'm not sure what we want to do with here. Let's go ahead and press play and go for a bit before we start pressing stuff and seeing what all can be done. Alright, the Ottoman Empire before the Weltkrieg. Okay, there we go. The Ottoman Empire, once one of the greatest empires in history, saw its decline commence in the late 18th century, developing to a point of being known as the sick man of Europe. By the early 20th century, an inability to effectively industrialize constant foreign meddling in its affairs, a troubling hold on a lot of its provinces meant that the Ottoman Sultanate had fallen well back behind the European powers by 1876. Nonetheless, the Ottomans reformed, and despite the issues that posed on a local level where tribal issues and a corrupt bureaucracy reigned supreme, light could be seen, prompted by Mahmud III in the early 19th century and further pursued by the young Ottomans. Radical changes were introduced in the empire. The ownership was restructured, the Janissaries eradicated, central rule established in regions such as Mosul and Al-Hassa, and a constitution promulgated. The focus of these reforms was based on the idea of Ottomanism and attempted to foster common identity for all of its inhabitants besides their local one. would not be enough. With Abdul Hamid II's rise to power, a change would come once more. In the pretext of the Russo-Turkish War, the constitution was abolished and parliament sent packing. This period saw a radical centralization of power under the figure of Sultan Caliph. Constant threat by Christian powers, the Sultan turned towards pan-Islamism based on the prestige of the Caliphate, and despite enjoying great success from the Muslim population, this would only hasten to approach the territories without these. Furthermore, the absolute rule fostered great discontent among a population which increasingly became familiar with Western ideas. This resistance would be consolidated itself in the shape of the Committee of Union and Progress. A coup d'etat in 1908 in Ottoman politics, long suppressed by Sultan, burst into the open. Dozens of parties would attempt to find a seat within the newly restored parliament as it seemed the Ottoman decline. Finally, at the end, united democratic forces would not last. Work saw a split between the decentralists and the centralists, though tumultuous 5 years, these two sides would battle for control. In 1913, with the raid on the submarine port, the game was up. The centralists, with the significant public figures as three pashas, would eradicate all remaining power of the decentralists and keep the nation their image. The great threat by imperialists, they ultimately strengthened ties with Germany's. Interesting. The Ottoman Empire officially entered the Weltkrieg in October 29, 1914, with the arrival of Wilhelm Soch with the Goeben and Breslau and the shelling of Odessa. The Ottomans won several significant victories in the early years of the war, such as the Battle of Gallipoli and the Siege of Kut. But there were setbacks as well, such as the disastrous Caucasus campaign against the Russians. The disaster continued in 1916, the start of the Arab Revolt, combined with the new British offensive under the command of General Edmund Allenby, coming to a head in 1918. Devastating defeat in Palestine led to a mass retreat of Ottoman forces. Jerusalem, Damascus, and Aleppo fell in a quick succession. But only the controversial decision by the commander of the Sixth Army to withdraw into the mountains of Anatolia was able to stop the chain reaction. Valiant defeat at Entebbe and Pyrrhic victory near Raz ultimately stopped Allenby in his tracks. At that point, the atmosphere of the empire was rapidly changing. The Ottoman government realized that even a victory came at a cost. Furthermore, the change had happened in the past as well. The CUP puppet Mehmed V had passed away, and his wake followed the far more assertive Vahaddin. Seeing the collapse of the empire on all fronts, and with the CUP government held responsible for the disaster, he would lash out and attempt to shift power to his allies in the HIF. With the ground heating up under their feet, Talat Pasha would then, at the investigation of Jamal Pasha, attempt to shut down the Sultan. Harsh famine in Istanbul due to refusal by German forces to fight with Ukrainian grain, betrayal in the Caucasus by its allies, and the attempt to silencing the Sultan rumors. The commander of the Sixth Army was in open conflict with the Ministry of War would finally tip the bucket over, and a massive wave of anti-German and pacifists for the cabinet of Talat Pasha was forced to resign and concede to the Sultan. Mehmed Pasha was appointed by Grand Vizier and tasked with the creation of the government of national unity. Under pressure of the CUP, the only slave to grasp in the power made the negotiations collapse. Mehmed Pasha resigned and was replaced by Ahmad Zet Pasha, creating a government consisting of Khalil Bey, D. Pasha, Will Pasha. It became quickly that the CUP was far from defeated. Interesting. Fall of Greece and the growing risk of revolution. The British Protectorate of Egypt caused Allenby to revise his strategy and withdraw part of his forces. As France collapsed in the late 1919, the war entered its closing stage. In contrast with the Western Front, however, where Austrian forces pushed into Italy and Germans into France and Belgium, the Ottomans at this first moment had lost over half their empire. They occupied or readily vulnerable to concentrated British attack and were held up by the British forces likely to stand down. Sultan Wadin negotiated with the British in an attempt to salvage what remained of the empire, while Britain reconsidered its attitudes in the Middle East. The Treaty of Copenhagen ceased fire later that year, demanding immediate withdrawal of remaining Entente forces from the territory of the Central Powers. A rapid solution for the Eastern question was necessary. Further, for the British in Egypt, Afghanistan, and occupied Iraq ultimately forced their hand, and the order was given to withdraw. Only Palestine and Vassar would remain in their occupation. The instances of John Smuts and Leo Emery. So an equitable treaty was reached surrounding the rights of its minorities, masking their intentions of an Indian base in Iraq and a fortified position near the Suez. But certainly in the political climate of the Ottoman Empire, punishment for the perpetrators of the Armenian massacre, far from likely international opinion, shifted away from the empire, losing much of its support from the Central Powers. An accord was reached in the summer of 1820, where two autonomous regions were established, to great anger of both Turks and Arabs. The Mustafa of Jerusalem was created in Palestine, stretched from Allenby line to the Red Sea. The Sejour part of the Ottoman Empire was governed by a national council consisting of the German Empire, British Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, USA, and the Ottomans themselves, forbidding the entry of Ottoman troops and international German force would maintain the peace in Palestine, and a new home would be created for the Syrian people whose exodus from the plains of Nura and Lake Yermanium would have left refugees in Iran open house to ambitions. Interesting. So can we see that? Oh, there it is. It's literally the same color as us. So it's hard to see, but yes, that is in fact there. As a formal peace finally arrived in 1921, the borders of the Ottoman Empire largely remained the same. The oblasts of Kars and Arden were recovered with the addition of Yevrin, while in the Aegean, the Italians were pushed out of the Dokanese. Damage had been immense, however, as the action of CP, especially Mullah Pasha, just between the Turks and Arabs, had burst into open, while in eastern Anatolia and Lebanon, whose whole population were eradicated either through forced deportation or starvation, losses Turkish side became colossal, as well as leading population and sharp decline in agricultural output, the empire's main source of income. The Arab Revolt had been a colossal failure. The need for reform was recognized. Insight to the Arab Congress of 1913, the Arabic language was recognized as the second language of the empire. Increasing factionalism within the CUP and the meteoric rise of many military figures tore away with the internal stability of the party. The betrayal by its German allies in Palestine gave rise to substantial anti-German faction as public support for the party declined even further. The CUP changed its name to Tekta and openly ousted some of its dictatorial figures within. Pasha went packing while Talat's influence was greatly reduced. Working for his position in the Ministry of War, Mustafa Kemal Pasha ousted the German military mission and commenced an ambitious military restructuring. Giving great acclaim for his actions, Kemal continued laying the foundation for his rise of power. Fearing another Nur Pasha, the upper committee of the party crushed Khaled Bey forward as its leader. Incapable of successfully challenging him, Kemal made a successful bid for the power in 1925 and then became the same second time the Ottoman People's Party. Interesting. Right. In 1926, election ended in a victory for the OHF. Many were quick to remark that this was less to the party itself and more to the fragmentation of the opposition. Where more than a dozen parties fought for any given seat, the newly appointed Grand Vizier did not hide his ambitions, and with a flurry of reforms, he pushed the nation towards ideals. Massive strides were undertaken in the areas of education, economic recovery, and the fight against the religious establishment. The authoritarian style of the Grand Vizier, however, led to a further splintering of the party when his former ally and friend, Kazim Karbekir Pasha, broke into the party and created his Democratic Party. Their threat by rapid centralization of the government apparatus and with many conservatives afraid that the OHF would be attempting to break with tradition. In 1931, elections ended in the first electoral defeat for the OHF. The Ottoman Party for Administrative Decentralization under its leader, Haki al-Azim, became the grand winner of the election, for coalition with the HIF and the DF to provide a united front against the growing centralist threat. The coalition, however, was under constant attack as the various parties had played part in it and had conflicting opinions on non-OHF policy. Tensions reached a breaking point. In 1932, when the government of Haki al-Azim collapsed due to disagreement with the HIF and DF, a new government was created under HIF leadership as a minority government, failing to achieve its goals of decentralization and liberalization. Continued failures by the coalition went a long way to repairing the reputation of the OHF and received a solid majority in 1935. Elections, its Grand Vizier Mustafa Kemal Pasha began his second term in office. Signs have started to appear that he may not be looking for an alternative to the constant election by Ottoman chamber deputies and interference with the conservatives lobby through the Caliph. Interesting. Okay. That was a lot. We have... Okay. The Ottoman economy in 1936. Aftermath of the infamous decade. This is in 1920, and there was finally came to an end almost a decade of non-stop war. The economy of the Ottoman Empire lay in tatters. A manufacturing company, which had seen a slow but steady growth in the CUP area, was knocked down as the efforts of the Armenian genocide took a toll on the educated middle class. Doctors, engineers, and entrepreneurs, etc., all became critical jobs as the continued exodus by Greek Ottoman citizens in Asia Minor showed how devastating the national economy plan was to the ravaged nation. In a way, the agricultural sector was ruined as the real effects of the war started to sink in. The loss of Anatolian Turkish population was mind-boggling. 25% of the people population was gone. We mined abundance of land without manpower to work it. Nonetheless, the civil import did not sadly buy. Plans for a swift recovery were nonetheless drafted as the first post-war cabinet made it their number one priority. Railroads left behind by investors in the nation no longer existing were nationalized. The dreaded OPDA was completely shut down and its was transferred over to the state. The national economy program became the number one priority for the Ottoman government as the horrors of the war, the reliance on untrusted non-Turkish population left deep scars among the ruling elite. Muslim bourgeoisie had to be groomed to challenge the traditional Christian dominance, and the people educated the empire finally launched in the 1920s. As the years ticked by and the economy reached its pre-war state by the late 20s, the ruling OHF took development to the next level. A sequence of 4-year plans were laid out on the table, and the hold of the government on the economy was tightened even further. And in 1931, the unthinkable happened. The Nationalist coalition, decisively brought down by the Liberal Entente, reopened the economy to foreign investment and toned down the Etatist measures. So carefully crafted until a decade before, nonetheless, the economy became expanding as industry popped up all across Anatolia and Levant, financed by an almost never-ending wave of economic prosperity in the Ottoman Empire, no import costs for the machinery and building materials. By the middle of the 30s, the Turkish economy had never seen better days. As the free and progress could be felt from Brit to Savant. Nonetheless, many have pointed out warning signs horizon as the increasing instability on the continent and the stagnation of an economy will likely bring issues to the Grand Orient as well. Let's see. So, institutionalized Islam, we lose political power gain and stability. Widespread illiteracy, that's probably what we're going to try to fix. Armed neutrality, that explains the low war support, but we get stability in division events. Stability of the realm. Updates dynamically. Okay. Does it say what ours is right now? I don't know. The OHF is who's in power right now. So we got the Democratic Party. Okay. Peter Van Gogh takes control. Assassination of Kerensky. Let's see. Who was the Freedom and Accord Party, Democratic Party? Oh yeah, Ottoman People. Okay. Fight over the minds and spirits of the population had vigorously fought over the last decade of the unrelenting pace of modernization. Also greatly affected his field. Started deep into the 19th century, the reforms have progressed in a steady progression over the years, mostly carried by the... Oh, sorry, I lost my place. The reforms had progressed in a steady progression over the years, mostly carried by the secularist movement. The OHF had continued to reflect post-war Creek with the participation of women in higher education, officials full education only a year later, promoted by Sultan Wadi. Nonetheless, the policies finding it hard to be fully implemented on the ground, as heavy opposition from the conservative Ummah and the continued split in various education systems made any such solution hard to accomplish. The Ottoman education system, consisting of 3 main branches, remains divided, and even though the Adad and Sultani form of schools established by the Tezmat reforms, united in one distinct curriculum, the Madrasa religious education minority schools protected by the millet system remain a thorn in the side of the Ministry of National Education. Long have been a staple of the OHF. It is detailed its plan to unite all 3 systems, placing them directly in the ministry, streamline the curricula to promote social cohesion and make it more approachable to the common citizen. Over the last few years, during the first tenure of 1927, massive strides were made towards accomplishing this goal, but the squint decentralized government in 1931 has overturned this policy once more in favor of education of the level, such causing a divide in both the quality and accessibility of education depending on efforts of the wali. Now that the OHF is back firmly in the saddle, it is brought table of some of its on the Co-Education Unification Act, finally put to law the full unification of education in the entire realm and force co-education of male and female. The party has found itself against a wall of conservative forces funded by the powerful too large in an attempt to prevent their power from government getting the fate. There's change in the air. Okay, so we not enough. Okay, not enough weapons. Okay, so we want to try to get these guys integrated. Okay. This fights back against the OHF. Petition signed by 300 Ulma across the empire has reached the desk of the Grand Vizier earlier this week as the nearing vote on the Co-Education Unification Act, starting up commotion throughout the nation. Nonetheless, there is no united opposition to the act, as even within the Ulma themselves, many are seeing the benefits of centralized education, some even openly expressing support for the act. So goes up. Okay. Arab Peninsula. 1 building slot and more integration. Sure. Can increase these guys to get more Expand the system. Try after the conquest of the island by Sultan Sim II system. Land grants or Timors for his victorious soldiers were established. They granted them land on the island in hopes of promoting the Turkish community on the otherwise prominent Greek island. This system has long remained in use. By the 19th century, Guerrillas had remained an vibrant Turkish population centered on soldiers or senates. The pastoral wars were forced to endure their decades and once again have a large amount of Turkish veterans looking to settle down. Giving them to Mars, we hope that they will integrate themselves in the Greek community and hopefully make the island more Ottoman. Sure. You know what? We'll do Ottoman. Yeah, let's do this first. Gridlock in France and the education, including the controversial Education Unification Act. The Chamber of Representatives was presented with the wide variety of decrees and plans by the modernist OHF. OHF has a majority in the House after their 1935 electoral success. Many are worried that the Sultan may yet interfere through the Senate, whose members are almost entirely appointed by the opposition himself. Known for being a devout Muslim and sharing many of the conservative of the opposition, Sultan has kept himself absent from the political process ever since his ascension 10 years ago, either because of the general apathy or as some whisperers fear of what happened to Abdul Muhammad II may yet happen to him. The future of religious education throughout the is now online, however, we may expect to finally take a stance on the secularists. Okay, Afghanistan war. Alright, what do I want to do? No, I think I want. Here's what I want to do. I want a strong Ottoman Empire, no matter the cost. So we'll go the. Oh yeah, it's what we want. The Ottoman People's Parties who we'll be siding with, and the Grand Vizier speaks. And what I was going to say is we're going to go with United once more. I think. Ooh, wait. No, I think that's exactly what we'll do. We'll go for a directly integrating them into the Ottoman Empire and making the Ottoman Empire stronger through modernizing. Okay. Who do we want to do? Replace the Penal Code or the Judicial Commission? As the Ottoman Civil Code is based on the Sharia in the shape of the Misali, many of the reformers have attempted to replace it with the modernized and secular variant. An attempt at doing so was started in 1930, but the electoral defeat in 1931 forced the OHF to reveal its position. The parties back in charge, it seemed only natural to push it once more. Black Monday. Grand Vizier speaks to the international press, speaking to editors of both Constantini and the international papers. The Grand Vizier has given a statement on the success of the vote and the expansion of the ministry. The decision taken by the Ottoman Parliament today is what the nation had wanted naturally and genuinely. There is no need to look at something extraordinary. Showing off the stack of letters you see from the International of the Empire Pasha had once again from international presence people stand behind him. Whether or not this is actually the case is left vague, and opposition papers are already describing vividly how it is in front to the proud traditions of our state. A great success for our Ottoman nation. So I think we have to fight the Cairo Pact because both of these they are defeated. All right. Antun City publishes the Genesis of a Nation. Journalist from Beirut is making shockwaves in Syria with his romantic view of the greater Syria free from Ottoman rule. Taking inspiration from the ancient Syrian Empire, turned to the Fertile Crescent of old, he pleads the nation to spread from the Suez Canal to the south to the Taurus Mountains to the north, and from Kuwait to the east to Cyprus. In the west, the Suez Canal in the south to the Taurus Mountains to the north, and the Kuwait in the east to Cyprus to the west. The survival of our nation consisting of such massive amounts of different ethnicities and religions may seem like a fairy tale. The man not only follows them closer to the commodities of the secular state, but also inspiration from the syndicalist powers of the empire as well. With a focus on abolishing feudalism, especially in vital areas of our economy, mandatory education, and universal healthcare. Even though it's popular among the Syrian people, seem rather low for now, the governor of Beirut has already arrested and the man has been president for treason activity against investigating religious activities. Troubling news. It's not good. The Ottoman Empire withdraws. Nothing too surprising there. And yeah, there we go. We are short a bunch of guns. League of 8 provinces collapse. I wonder, we aren't producing very many guns. How's our construction going? How bad is this? It's not too bad. How many would we need to trade? 2, that's fine. This chaos disaster. All across the world, economists and business owners say a panic as the unthinkable happened earlier this week. The Berlin Stock Exchange collapsed in window Berlin. Constantly is on high alert for any changes to the situation as they watch the economy collapse into the ground. Nonetheless, there is far less of a crisis in the empire than many initially expected. Its protectionist nature of the empire during the 1920s have formed a foundation of structure capable of resisting most shocks on the global market. Show the fears of the private sector quelled, and to outline the next 4-year plan envisioned by the OHS economic partner, a second economic congress is planned to be held in the city of Samson and the Black Sea. Combining both projects from the private sector and showcasing the advances of the Turkish economy over the last few decades not only serves as a way to calm down Ottoman investors, but also showcase a modernizing Ottoman to the world. We lose stability, gain consumer goods, and lose construction, and what this will probably do, after we do these 3, we can probably start doing, there we go. Let's pass the reforms first, and then we'll start dealing with the economic depression. We'll get those out of the way and see if maybe this can help us get better control. I wonder. Yeah, they can't do much, but we can probably find a way to, here, let's take a look. Oh yeah, we're not part of a... So these guys have no loyalty to us? Their international mandate cannot yet become free, so they're not even close to, being able to integrate them. Alright. The former imperial residence of the House of Osman, Topek Palace, was ordered in 1459 by the men to conquer. As the centuries dragged on, however, sultans and their households preferred rather residence on the Asian side of the Bosphorus, leading to the court moving over to the Mulk Palace. Thus, retaining some of its former functions, such as the imperial treasury, the palace was finally emptied in 1927 after the death of Ming IV earlier this year. Sultan Admiral Masid II, a patron of the arts and famous artist himself, subsequently granted the grounds to the Ottoman state for use as a museum and art exposition. Thus, for almost 8 years, the buildings were thoroughly renovated and restored in an attempt to once more show the splendor of the Ottoman Empire and hopefully rekindle an old Ottoman spirit. By opening a splendid party on New Year, the old Sultan himself presented a multitude of his own works and various masterpieces of contemporary Ottoman art to the gathered presses. And we gained some stability. Nice. Right, in Civil Code, we've used the era. I think this is mostly what I already read. Their own codes for decades is mostly unchanged. Mustafa Kemal, who is otherwise averse to his non-secular character, has thus opened a debate to the question of legal reform and cleared those committee tasked with investigating possible judicial reform. Alright, cool. Not really a decision there, but that's fine. Place the penal code. While the current penal code serves well, the Grand Vizier has been his highest reform enacted by the Italian Republic. It not only provides us with a better and modernized code, but also includes special clauses targeting political dissent, such as syndicalist movement, which seems quite useful tool to the administration. Right, death of the Pope, Mosley in charge. The Ottoman Party for Administration is making increasing waves. Who are you? I'm blind, because I must not see. Okay. One part of Ministry is making increasing waves in watching for various parties of greater Syrian region to this organization. Although a similar hand was reached out to the Arab parties in Iraq, offers Pakistan is fear of increasing Muslim influence on the Arab movement, as seen as a counterproductive to the ultimate goal of Arab economy, only making themselves a bigger target. Alright, social liberals. Okay, a Freedom and Accord Party. Right, Gallo seizes control in Ecuador, and even though we didn't get many focuses done, we have unfortunately ran out of time. That was probably to expect that we didn't get much done because there was a lot of backstory that we had to read. But please do look and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.